Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Cimnanya, and thank you all so much for all the love and support. Hope you all are doing great. Today, we'll be talking something very important, and it's about a video that I came across, and I was like, I am definitely bringing this here because people that look like me have been going through a lot of this for so many years, and still to this very moment, it is happening. And the fact that some of the doctors will leave what they are supposed to do when you come in contact with them, or when somebody that looks like me come to the hospital, probably like emergency and all that. Some of them, they end up saying that probably the person is overdosed on drugs and all that. Why? And I am going to ask this: why is it that they always stereotype us, or they always make an excuses for their rate of the season? Now, I have seen so many videos where so many doctors or nurses actually come on the internet to say some horrible things about Black people. Some of them are still in nursing school. And the truth is that the school never do anything. They did not do anything about it. And all these people are the people that will get into finish medical school, start working in hospitals, and then start doing so many crazy things to people that look like me. Right? And we've been screaming this, we've been talking about this, but it looks like they do not want to listen. They don't want to hear anything because they keep telling us when you stop talking about it, it is going to go away. This is a matter of life and death, right? It is our health, and we need to take our health very importantly. You know what? Let's get into this video.
Racism is a public health crisis. Story time. I'm a nurse. I was one of the nurses that traveled around this country taking care of coronavirus patients during the pandemic. I started in New York, and from New York I went to Philadelphia. And I was working in one of the most prominent hospitals, in the ICU there in Philadelphia. And this is what I saw with my own eyes. There's a Black woman, a mom and a wife. She had 2 twin boys and a husband that loved her intensely. She came into the hospital, into the ED, complaining of shortness of breath. Chest was tight and heavy. She tested positive for coronavirus. She stayed in that hospital for a long time, and her husband could not go with her, so there was no one there to advocate for her. She was already weak when he dropped her off, but because of quarantine laws, he could not go in. She called him on the phone, on her cell phone, and she said, "Baby, I think we need to leave. Come and get me. I think I need to go to another hospital." He said, "Why?" She said, "Because I've been sitting here, and it's getting harder and harder for me to breathe, and nobody's come in this room." He told her, "Baby, the hospitals are full, and right now they have you in a room. So it's best for you to stay there, and let's find out what they see." So she did. He said, "I'll stay on the phone with you." They stayed on the phone talking. He talking to her getting more short of breath until her phone died. He said about 3 hours later, she called him, still short of breath, and said, "They're sending me home." He said, "Are you sure? Baby, you sound worse." She said, "Yes, they said I'm not sick enough, and if I get any sicker, that I need to come back." So he came and picked up his wife. She stayed at home for 2 more days. She returned back to the hospital, where they put her in an ER room again and left her there. And when they came back into the room to check on her, they found her completely unconscious. They intubated her, and that's when she ended up in the ICU, where I was her nurse. I talked to her husband on the phone, and I know that he was talking to me about her, trying to humanize her to me. What he didn't realize is she was already human to me, to this Black woman who was the exact same age as her. And talking to this man, he told me that she was the love of his life. They met in high school. He never loved anyone else. And he begged me to please do everything I could to help his wife come home to him and to their twin boys. And I promised him that I would. I promised him that I would do everything that I could. And she remained my patient for the next 3 days. And in those 3 days, I had constant conversations, updating a husband. It was me. I was the nurse that put my PPE on and went into her room and held the iPad. And I listened to her boys sing to her tell her stories, encourage her to get better. I listened to all of the things that her husband said. And as the time progressed, I realized that he was starting to say things to her to make sure she knew them because he knew she was dying. I was the nurse that stood at her bedside and held her hand while she took her last breaths. On the course of those 3 days, I started to read her chart. And what I found was on that first day that she came into the ED, the ER doctor charted that she was a poor historian. She was very disoriented, and he suspected that there was intoxicating agents on board. And what that meant was he was saying he thought that she was drunk or high on drugs. And although she did test positive for coronavirus, that her disposition was related to her intoxication and not being short of oxygen, and she was intoxicated on carbon dioxide. If he had kept her that first day, we maybe could have saved her life. But because he looked at that black woman and assumed that she was on drugs, he sent her home. And she ended up dying. That man's wife, those boys' mother, the love of his life, died because a doctor looked at the color of her skin in the middle of a pandemic and thought she was intoxicated instead of dying from coronavirus. I stood at her bedside while she took her last breath, listening to her husband say his final goodbyes, knowing that it didn't have to be if they had just believed that black woman. To all my black nurses, my colleagues, nurses of color, you have seen these types of things. And that woman that is graduating from nursing school in Indiana, this Asia Blayton, it is time for us to rally together. She does not need a nursing license because racism is already killing our people. We need to make sure
I speak so freely about white people because I understand one amazing thing that I don't think a lot of people understand, which would help us get so far beyond that pseudo-racism conversation and just get right to the points that we want to, especially when the work that we're doing includes addressing white supremacy. The only white people who get insecure when you're addressing white supremacy are white people that don't have a culture. More times than not, it's American white people or white people who exist in the countries that have colonized other people's cultures and exploited those because they had no actual inner creativity to create their own culture to appreciate and then share with the world. So these people quite literally need to exist in a reality where they are entitled to exploit somebody else's divine nature to create culture. So specifically speaking about America, because we don't have a culture here, this is basically just the Disneyland of cultural exploitation. The only thing you can do is wear a bastardized version of somebody else's culture on your face and say that you appreciate it because you're quite literally wearing it like an O.J. Simpson glove, instead of being able to actually travel to the environments where people are practicing said culture and then being able to sit back as a novice and appreciated based on how that tribe or that community is willing to accept you. Not based on how bad you feel you want it or how entitled you are to actualizing yourself through becoming a monk or becoming a this or living in a tribe with a village. So this usually affects American white people because consumerism is not a culture. Consumerism is a disease because you're creating your identity off of how much you can consume or what the quality is of your consumption, but you're never engaging or contributing to the collective by creating anything of any value that can be appreciated by anybody. You are quite literally just taking up space here. And I was just fortunate enough to have an amazing conversation about this like 2 days ago. And the conclusion that I came to was, and I was fortunate enough to have a conversation in this same regard a couple of days ago. The conclusion I came to was that people who lack resources but have a sense of culture will survive that lack of resources or that inability to sustain themselves materially. But people who don't have a culture have to hoard as much material as possible around themselves to protect themselves from being faced with what they would be if they had to address who they are behind the mask, who they are at their soul. So, again, it's necessary in their identity that they're entitled to exploiting and having and masking themselves with other people's resources to protect not only themselves, but all of us from seeing who they truly are at their truth and who they can't hide from us anymore. And now I want to bring that all the way back down on just like a person-to-person level. If you don't have a real sense of culture, you will never be able to make it beyond a world where we actively dismantle white supremacy, because your whole entire sense of identity is rooted in beliefs and ideologies that come from that foundation. You have to be on top of society. You have to be exploiting people. You have to be in a disadvantaged angle of power. And you never, in that respect, give yourself an opportunity to create an authentic sense of value from who you are within right now. Not for whatever future projects you're working on to like colonize the moon, or not to uphold your history of your past. Because, I mean, look at your past. How commendable is that to anybody other than a group of these people, bro? So, let's be honest here, gang. The only people who are scared of this new world that's coming up are people who they get their whole entire identity and validation out of this world we live in right now. And there's nothing good that comes from this world we live in right now, other than good things for horribly shitty people. So, why would you be afraid of leaving this behind to go to where we need to go, where people can be appreciated and respected for who they are outside of what the white man decides to see us as?
So this is all I got from the video, and the whole thing is really very sad. The fact that medical racism is something that it's, I don't know, but I want to ask this question to my colored subscribers. Why is it that when something happens to a young black man, whether young or old, they are very quick to not even bother checking, but they will tell you that probably he did drug or he's probably overdosed on something? Why is it that? How do you, somebody that came for medical examination, or when you see somebody passing out, You are supposed to save life because that is your work. That is your first duty as a doctor or whoever, right? But no, the first thing you people are going to ask is, why did you overdose? Or like, I feel like you are like, you took something or you were high or something like that. This is not my first time of hearing this. I have actually brought out so many videos of I remember the one that happened to a young black man who was actually walking on the way on the road and was shot and was quickly rushed to the hospital, right? So when he was losing blood. When he got to the hospital, the doctor was kind of nonchalant to attend to him and all that. And there was a black nurse there, a Jamaican black American black nurse who actually was the one that talked, and before they started attending to the young man. And eventually they found out that because the doctor was already saying that he's probably a child or just somebody on the streets that probably did something to his gang and was kind of Pe0ple and the rest of it. So eventually they started treatment and all that just for the young man to actually find out that, the doctor to find out that the young man is actually also a graduate. I think he's a lawyer, right? A graduate who actually traveled to that town, the city, to see the grandmother before that incident happened. So sometimes they are very quick to judge us without even knowing anything about us, and then end up maltreating us or treating us in a way that is not supposed to be. I keep saying this. I really do not see why a doctor is supposed to leave what he or she is supposed to do to save life and start asking unnecessary questions when somebody is even unconscious, or you see that this person is something is going wrong and you are supposed to do something. That is when they will become very sluggish, right? And we keep screaming about all this, all the time. Black people are screaming about what is going on to them, what is happening to them, how all these are going on. Black pregnant women they have high chances of being unalive. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. They have high chances of being unalive when they are pregnant or having a child, So all these are things that should be looked into. And now there are some things you also see. You see that some of them already have made up their mind that I am going to frustrate these people if I ever become a doctor or a nurse. Because there was a video I did yesterday about a palm-colored, she's still in nursing school, saying so many racist things about people that look like me. So you can imagine when she becomes a nurse or a doctor and she has that kind of attitude towards black people, what are you going to say? What will you say? So I think it's time they stop with all this judging people without even knowing them, or leaving the work that they are assigned to, or the work they are supposed to do, instead of being the Messiah, because that is what I always feel like they are always coming up to act like Messiah or this is Savior and all that. And then that also reminds me about a black man who actually took the grandmother to a hospital, right? And the young man actually mentioned, and they wrote it down on the woman's report or on her file, the things she is allergic to, right? All the things she is allergic to, they wrote it down. Do you know, the young man just stepped out, let him pick up something for the grandmother and come back. They gave that same woman the same thing that was on the file that they said that she is allergic to. Did she pass? That was the end of it. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.